I want you to think about someone you love, a parent, a spouse, a best friend, someone whose face just appeared in your mind. Now I want you to consider this. According to the latest data from the CDC, the average American will spend the last 12 years of their life in a state of chronic illness, not living, surviving, dependent on medications, unable to do the things they used to love, slowly losing the version of themselves that the people around them remember. 12 years, that is not a statistic. That is a sentence. And the most devastating part is that the majority of those years are not taken by genetics or bad luck or some unavoidable fate. They are taken by habits, invisible, daily, completely normalized habits that nobody ever warned you about. And before you think you already know what I'm going to say, I am not going to tell you to stop eating fast food. I am not going to tell you to sleep 8 hours or drink more water. You have heard all of that before. What I am about to share with you are 8 habits that are quietly destroying the health of millions of Americans right now. Habits that almost nobody talks about, that your doctor has almost certainly never mentioned, and that the science of the last decade has revealed to be far more dangerous than most people could ever imagine. By the time this video is over, you will never look at your daily routine the same way again. Before we start, drop a comment right now telling me what state you're from. I read every single comment and I want to know where you're watching from. Let's get into it. Here is what makes these 8 habits so dangerous. They don't hurt. There is no immediate consequence. No pain, no alarm, no warning signal from your body telling you that something is wrong. The damage accumulates silently over months and years, building underneath the surface like pressure behind a dam, until one day it isn't silent anymore. Until one day it becomes a diagnosis, a hospital visit, a conversation you never wanted to have. The cruel irony of modern chronic disease is that by the time you feel it, it has already been happening for a very long time. What we are going to do in this video is pull back the curtain on 8 specific behaviors, things you are likely doing today, right now, possibly as you watch this, and show you exactly what they are doing to your body at a biological level. Not in vague, general terms, in precise, documented, scientifically verified terms. Because you deserve to know the truth about what is happening inside you. And because knowing it is the first step toward changing it. The first habit almost nobody talks about is something so fundamental, so automatic, that most people have never once thought to question it. The way they breathe. Specifically, breathing through the mouth instead of the nose, and doing it chronically day after day, and most critically, throughout the night while sleeping. The human nose is one of the most sophisticated filtration and processing systems in the body. When air enters through the nasal passages, it is warmed, humidified, filtered for pathogens, and enriched with nitric oxide, a molecule that plays a critical role in dilating blood vessels, regulating blood pressure, and optimizing the delivery of oxygen to tissues throughout the body. When you breathe through your mouth, you bypass every single one of those mechanisms. You deliver cold, dry, unfiltered, nitric oxide depleted air directly into your lungs and bloodstream. The consequences of chronic mouth breathing are far more serious than most people realize. Research published in the journal Sleep and Breathing found that mouth breathing during sleep is one of the primary drivers of sleep-disordered breathing, including obstructive sleep apnea, a condition that silently stops your breathing hundreds of times per night and has been directly linked to hypertension, heart arrhythmias, stroke, and sudden cardiac death. And here is what makes this particularly alarming. The majority of people who mouth breathe during sleep have no idea they are doing it. They wake up tired with a dry throat, perhaps a mild headache, and they blame stress or age or just having a bad night. They never connect it to the way they are breathing. Beyond sleep, chronic mouth breathing activates the sympathetic nervous system, the branch of the autonomic nervous system responsible for the fight-or-flight stress response. This means that people who habitually breathe through their mouth are, at a physiological level, keeping their body in a low-grade state of chronic stress throughout the day. Cortisol stays elevated, the immune system is suppressed, inflammatory markers in the blood remain persistently high. Over years, this biological stress state quietly builds the conditions for cardiovascular disease, metabolic dysfunction, and anxiety disorders that feel impossible to explain or resolve. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Nasal breathing, practiced consciously during the day and supported during sleep. But the awareness of the problem is nearly non-existent in mainstream health conversation. And that invisibility is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. The second habit is one that the vast majority of Americans perform every single morning without a second thought. And it is doing something to your brain and your hormonal system that sets the entire trajectory of your day and, over time, your long-term mental and physical health. The habit is reaching for your phone within the first 10 minutes of waking up. Here is what is actually happening in your brain during those first minutes of the morning. Your body has just completed a complex hormonal transition. Cortisol, which gets a bad reputation but is absolutely essential in its natural morning form, has been rising gradually since about 3 a.m. in a process called the cortisol awakening response. This natural spike is designed to mobilize energy, sharpen focus, regulate inflammation, and prepare your immune system for the demands of the day. It is one of the most important biological events in your entire 24-hour hormonal cycle, and it requires one thing to complete properly: a period of low stimulation wakefulness, calm, quiet, gradual reorientation to the world. When you pick up your phone and immediately expose yourself to notifications, news headlines, emails, and social media, you are detonating a neurological grenade in the middle of that delicate hormonal process. The brain, which is in a highly impressionable theta wave state during the first moments of waking, is suddenly flooded with reactive stimuli. Things that demand an emotional response, that create urgency, that trigger comparison, anxiety, and the dopamine-seeking behavior that social media platforms are specifically engineered to produce. The cortisol awakening response is hijacked and converted from a healthy, natural hormonal event into the beginning of a stress response. Research published in the journal Frontiers in Psychiatry has shown that people who engage with their phones immediately upon waking report significantly higher levels of anxiety, emotional reactivity, and difficulty concentrating throughout the day, not just in the morning, but for the entire waking period. Over time, this daily pattern literally rewires the brain's stress architecture, lowering the threshold at which the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, fires in response to stimuli. In plain language, it makes you a more anxious, more reactive, more emotionally dysregulated person at a neurological level, and you will feel this as a personality trait rather than as a consequence of a morning habit. The implications for long-term health are significant. Chronically elevated morning cortisol driven by reactive phone use has been linked to increased visceral fat accumulation, impaired immune function, disrupted sleep architecture, and a measurably higher risk of depression and burnout. All from the first 10 minutes of the day, every day. The third habit is one that is particularly prevalent in modern American life, given the way most people structure their mornings. Never stepping outside to receive natural sunlight in the first hour after waking. This might sound trivial. It is anything but. The human body runs on a biological clock, the circadian rhythm, that governs virtually every physiological process in the body, including hormone secretion, immune function, metabolic rate, body temperature regulation, cellular repair, and the sleep-wake cycle. This clock is exquisitely sensitive to light, and it is calibrated, reset, and synchronized, primarily by exposure to natural sunlight in the morning hours. Specifically, the low-angle, blue spectrum light that exists in natural outdoor light during the first hour or two after sunrise. This is not something that can be replicated by indoor lighting. It is not something your phone screen or your office fluorescent lights can substitute for. The photoreceptors in your eyes that perform this function require the specific spectral composition and intensity of real, outdoor, natural light. When the eyes receive morning sunlight, a cascade of biological events is initiated. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock of the brain, located in the hypothalamus, receives the signal and begins orchestrating the hormonal events of the day. Cortisol rises at the appropriate time and in the appropriate amount. Serotonin production is stimulated. the neurotransmitter that underpins mood, emotional stability, and social behavior. And that is also the precursor to melatonin, which is what allows you to fall asleep effectively at night. Dopamine receptors in the retina are activated, sharpening visual acuity and cognitive alertness. The entire hormonal and neurological schedule of the day is set in motion by this one input. When this input is absent, when people wake up, stay indoors, work under artificial light, commute in a car, and spend their entire day separated from natural outdoor light, the circadian system becomes desynchronized. The cortisol curve flattens or becomes erratic. Serotonin production is chronically low. Melatonin release at night is delayed, fragmenting sleep. Insulin sensitivity decreases. Inflammatory markers rise. The immune system loses its rhythmic regulation. Over time, circadian disruption has been identified as an independent risk factor for obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, depression, and several forms of cancer. Neuroscientist Andrew Huberman from Stanford University has described morning sunlight exposure as perhaps the single highest leverage behavioral intervention available to human beings for optimizing health, and it costs nothing. It requires only stepping outside for 10 to 20 minutes in the morning. Yet the overwhelming majority of Americans never do it. If you are watching this from a northern state where winters make morning sunlight scarce, leave a comment below, because there are specific strategies for those environments that make a real difference, and I want to address them. The fourth habit shifts away from light and breathing and into something that happens at least 3 times a day for most people: eating. But the focus here is not on what Americans are eating. It is on how fast they are eating it. And the science behind eating speed reveals a dimension of metabolic health that the mainstream nutrition conversation almost entirely ignores. The physiology of satiety, the sensation of being full and satisfied after a meal, is not instantaneous. It is a multi-step hormonal communication process between the gut and the brain that takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes to complete. When food enters the stomach and begins to stretch its walls, a series of hormonal signals are released, including peptide YY, GLP-1, and cholecystokinin, that travel through the bloodstream and the vagus nerve to reach the hypothalamus, where the sensation of fullness is registered. This process cannot be rushed. It operates on its own biological timeline. And when a meal is consumed in less than 10 minutes, which is the reality for millions of Americans eating at their desks, in their cars, or between meetings, the brain simply has not received the satiety signal by the time the food is gone. The result is consistent, systematic overconsumption at every single meal, independent of what is being eaten. But the consequences of eating fast go far beyond calorie intake. Research published in the BMJ Open Journal, drawing on data from over 59,000 participants, found that fast eaters were 115% more likely to be obese than slow eaters. And this association held even after controlling for diet quality, exercise habits, and caloric intake. The mechanism is partly hormonal and partly metabolic. Eating quickly produces sharper, higher, more disruptive spikes in blood glucose and insulin compared to eating slowly, even when the exact same meal is consumed. These insulin spikes, repeated multiple times per day over years, progressively impair insulin sensitivity and create the conditions for metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. There is also a significant impact on the gut itself. Rushed eating means inadequate chewing, which means larger food particles reaching the stomach and small intestine. Particles that the digestive system struggles to break down efficiently, leading to fermentation, bloating, dysbiosis, and chronic low-grade inflammation of the intestinal lining. The simple mechanical act of chewing thoroughly is one of the most underestimated tools in metabolic and digestive health, and it is one that modern American eating culture has all but eliminated. The fifth habit is one that will surprise almost everyone watching this, because it is something that virtually every American does every single day and considers not just normal, but hygienic and healthy. The habit is taking a long, hot shower daily. And the reason it belongs on this list has nothing to do with water temperature and everything to do with what lives on your skin and why it matters far more than most people have ever been told. The skin is not merely a physical barrier. It is a living ecosystem. The surface of the human body is home to trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, and viruses, collectively known as the skin microbiome. This microbial community is not contamination. It is protection. These organisms actively compete with and suppress pathogenic bacteria, regulate the skin's pH and inflammatory response, produce compounds that support immune signaling, and maintain the integrity of the skin barrier that separates the external environment from the internal body. Research over the past decade has revealed that the skin microbiome is as critical to systemic health as the gut microbiome, and that its disruption has consequences that extend far beyond skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis into systemic immune dysregulation and inflammatory disease. Daily hot showers, particularly when combined with conventional antibacterial soaps and body washes, are extraordinarily effective at stripping the skin microbiome. The hot water disrupts the skin's natural lipid barrier, the thin layer of oils that traps beneficial bacteria and seals moisture into the skin. The surfactants in soap then remove what remains. The result, after years of daily repetition, is a chronically disrupted skin barrier, a depleted protective microbial community, and a skin surface that is far more permeable to environmental toxins, allergens, and pathogens than it was designed to be. This is not an argument against personal hygiene. It is an argument for understanding that the obsession with sterility, with scrubbing every surface of the body with hot water and detergent every single day, is a modern behavior with no evolutionary precedent and with measurable biological costs that the mainstream conversation about health has almost entirely failed to address. The sixth habit is perhaps the most unexpected on this entire list, and for many people, it will be the one that provokes the most skepticism. But the research behind it is real, peer-reviewed, and published in serious scientific journals. The habit is never making direct physical contact between the bare skin of your feet and natural ground, soil, grass, sand, or any other conductive surface connected to the earth. This practice has a name in the scientific literature: earthing or grounding. The surface of the earth carries a mild negative electrical charge. The human body, particularly after a day of walking on insulating surfaces like rubber-soled shoes, synthetic carpets, and elevated floors, accumulates a positive charge, a buildup of free radicals, which are positively charged unstable molecules that cause oxidative stress and cellular damage. When bare skin makes contact with the earth, electrons flow from the ground into the body, neutralizing these free radicals and producing a measurable reduction in oxidative stress and systemic inflammation. Research published in the Journal of Environmental and Public Health documented significant reductions in inflammatory markers, improvements in sleep quality, normalization of the cortisol rhythm, and reduction in chronic pain among subjects who practice regular grounding. A study published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine found that grounding produced measurable changes in the electrical activity of the brain and in muscle tension within minutes of contact. These are not marginal, anecdotal effects. They are documented, reproducible biological responses to a behavior that human beings perform constantly and automatically for the entirety of the evolutionary history, and that modern life has almost completely eliminated. Most Americans spend their entire lives, from the moment they put on shoes as toddlers to the moment they walk on hospital linoleum at the end of their lives, without ever making meaningful, direct contact with the earth. The health implications of this complete disconnection are only beginning to be understood, but what is already known is significant enough to warrant serious attention. Tell me in the comments, when was the last time you walked barefoot outside? I genuinely want to know. The seventh habit is less about something people actively do and more about something they are universally failing to pay attention to. And that failure is allowing a critical warning system to go completely unmonitored until it is too late. Heart rate variability, or HRV, is the slight variation in time between consecutive heartbeats, and it is the most sensitive, most predictive, and most information-rich biomarker of overall health and stress that the human body produces. Yet almost no one monitors it, talks about it, or understands what it means. A healthy heart does not beat like a metronome. The intervals between beats vary slightly, expanding and contracting in response to the demands of the nervous system, the breath, and dozens of other biological inputs. This variability is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, specifically by the dynamic tension between the sympathetic branch, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic branch, rest and recovery. High HRV reflects a nervous system that is flexible, resilient, and capable of shifting fluidly between activation and recovery. Low HRV reflects a nervous system that is chronically dysregulated, stuck in a state of low-grade stress, unable to recover fully, burning through physiological reserves faster than they can be replenished. The predictive power of HRV for serious disease is extraordinary. Research published in the European Heart Journal found that low HRV is one of the strongest independent predictors of cardiovascular mortality, more predictive than cholesterol levels, resting heart rate, or blood pressure in many populations. Studies have linked chronically low HRV to increased risk of sudden cardiac death, depression, anxiety disorders, immune dysfunction, and all-cause mortality. And crucially, HRV begins to decline months or even years before any conventional medical test would detect a problem, making it a window into the developing disease that conventional medicine almost entirely ignores in routine care. The technology to monitor HRV now exists in consumer devices. Certain wearables track it continuously and can show trends over time. But without awareness of what HRV is and why it matters, most people scroll past this data without understanding that it may be telling them something their doctor's office would not catch until the damage was already done. The eighth and final habit is one that will challenge something many Americans consider one of their healthiest behaviors: drinking filtered water. Specifically, drinking water that has been stripped of its naturally occurring minerals through reverse osmosis or distillation processes, without any remineralization, and doing so as the primary source of hydration day after day. Water in its natural state, whether from springs, wells, or rivers, carries dissolved minerals, most critically magnesium, calcium, potassium, and bicarbonates. These are not impurities. They are nutrients. They are the same minerals that the human body has been obtaining from drinking water for the entirety of its evolutionary history, and they play roles in physiology that cannot be fully replaced by food alone. Magnesium in particular is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, including ATP energy production, DNA repair, nerve signal transmission, muscle contraction and relaxation, blood pressure regulation, and insulin secretion. It is not an optional micronutrient. It is foundational to nearly every system in the body. The problem is that surveys consistently show that more than 50% of Americans are deficient in magnesium, and the widespread adoption of mineral-stripped water is a significant contributing factor. When the body receives water that contains no magnesium, it must draw on its own reserves to maintain the electrolyte balance necessary for normal cellular function. Over time, if dietary intake is insufficient to compensate, and in the context of modern processed food diets, it often is, these reserves are depleted. The result is a deficiency that manifests in ways that are almost never connected to their true cause: persistent muscle cramps and twitching, heart palpitations and arrhythmias, chronic insomnia, anxiety that doesn't respond to conventional treatment, hypertension, constipation, migraines, and a general feeling of physical fragility and fatigue that doctors frequently label as stress or aging. The solution is not to stop filtering water for safety. Contaminant removal remains important, particularly in areas with older infrastructure. The solution is to remineralize filtered water, either through the addition of trace mineral supplements, through the use of mineral-adding filter stages, or through the regular inclusion of naturally mineralized spring water. This is a simple, inexpensive intervention with potentially profound effects on a body that has been running on mineral-depleted fuel for years. What these 8 habits share, and what makes them collectively so powerful and so dangerous, is their invisibility. None of them announce themselves. None of them cause immediate, obvious harm. They operate in the background of daily life, quietly accumulating biological debt that doesn't come due for years. And by the time it does, it is rarely traced back to its origins. The person with the heart arrhythmia is not told it may be connected to years of magnesium deficiency from demineralized water. The person with chronic anxiety is not told that reaching for their phone every morning may have literally rewired their stress response. The person who has been exhausted for years is not told that never seeing morning sunlight may have desynchronized every hormonal system in their body. This is not about blame. It is about information. Because the moment you understand the mechanism, the moment you can see the invisible chain connecting the habit to the outcome, everything changes. Awareness is not a passive state. It is the precondition for every meaningful change a person can make in their own life. You do not have to change all 8 things tomorrow. In fact, trying to change everything at once is one of the most reliable ways to change nothing at all. But if you can take one insight from this video, one habit that resonated with you, one mechanism that you recognized in your own life, and begin there, that is enough. That is how real, lasting change actually happens. One decision, made with understanding, repeated with intention. If this video gave you something you did not know before, if it shifted something in the way you think about your daily routine, then do one thing for me. Share it with one person you care about. Not because I need the views, because the people in your life are probably doing some of these 8 things right now, and they deserve to have the same information you just received. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which one of these 8 habits hit closest to home for you? Which one are you going to address first? I read every single comment. I want to know where you are watching from and what resonated with you most. Because this conversation doesn't end when the video does. It continues in the comments, and that is where the real community is built.